I actually work here, so I'm supposed to know how to work all the technology. And clearly, it's not true. Well, welcome you all again. So glad you all are here. It's wonderful. Deborah and I met, I don't know, a few months ago, I guess. We've had a lot of conversations, but one of the things that's so important to us at the Cox School of Business, needless to say, are our corporate relationships. And as we go out and we begin strengthening those relationships or making them strong, the current relationships already stronger, without question, one of our best partners, if not our best partner over time, has been AT&T. And what's happened between the Cox School of Business and this organization has just been transformational for us. As you all can imagine, really understanding the changing business marketplace for us will make or break a business school. It will make or break a campus. For those of you all who have been keeping up over the past few years, you understand that higher education's in a real transformational position. We're at a pivot point ourselves. And so these sort of relationships that we have with Deborah and her organization, and with John and Thaddeus Arroyo at AT&T, they are invaluable. And so understanding the marketplace and being able to talk about it in really kind of an informal way is a lot of fun, but make no mistake, it really will influence the position of higher education in the future as we come to understand not just the applied side, but the philosophical side of what's happening. Don't you agree?
I agree, and that's one of the reasons why we've partnered with SMU. When we talk about, when we've heard different speakers today, we've heard what got us here today will not get us to the next place. We need to make sure that we're investing in leadership. We're investing in those leaders that happen to be Latinos. There's something holding us back. There's something holding our mid-level managers from progressing. And we need to be intentional about this. We need to be able to identify the opportunities in terms of development. So a couple of years ago, we actually partnered with SMU. This was 2010, when SMU launched, the first program, which was called the CEDP program. It's a corporate educational development program targeted for Hispanics, basically. So, and the focus was, we're seeing a change in the demographics. We need to make sure that we're getting leadership to have this same type of image that our consumers have today. Same demographics that we're seeing out there. We heard it in the morning, right? We don't have that representation. So it really took a conversation and partnership and really identifying that as a company, we are really focused on diversity. You heard from Maria today, we are intentional about it. And we've made a lot of commitments around it. But focusing really on understanding what is holding them back, what is holding us back, is very important. So partnering with SMU, we actually made a commitment in terms of developing our Latino leaders. Not for them to be Latino leaders, but for them to be leaders that happen to be Latino and that can drive us to that next place that we want to be as a company. 2013, a couple of years later, SMU declared their commitment to founding the first Center of Latino Development, and that's called the LLI. For those of you who don't know it, there's a bunch of information. Anna's actually part of leading that effort, and that's why Anna has become so crucial in terms of this journey. So just a couple of stats. Over the course of the last couple of years, there's been approximately 250 graduates from this program. They're not just AT&T employees, they're employees from across corporate America. The program, up to this point, has actually been able to allow, and I'm not saying that this is only because of the program, but it has to do with this building awareness. 85% of those graduates today have been promoted. So it starts by educating, it starts by building awareness, and it starts by individuals being able to understand that it does not just take the same formula to get to that next level. It takes a different type of formula. It takes a lot more intentional behavior on behalf of individuals that want to grow.
And that's a great way to put kind of where we are inside of the Cox Leadership Development at large. We have a number of different leadership programs. This is just one of them because people are coming from a wide variety of different backgrounds, trying to understand the marketplaces, trying to understand the different organizational structures. We have small organizations, we have massive multinationals, and it takes a number of different ways to really kind of understand the markets and And of course, AT&T have been great partners in this. So let me ask you a couple of questions as we try to understand this. And you and I were kind of laughing about this just a minute ago. As you all see the changing marketplace, there are a couple of different terminologies that have come out of this. One of them is the tortilla effect. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what you think that is and how that influences you all.
So this tortilla effect, just, I sort of borrowed it from a lot of the conversations, a lot of the education that I've been able to receive. So I'm not going to claim rights over it, but it goes more like this. A couple of years ago, if you would walk into a supermarket, you would go to find maybe tortillas because you wanted to try tortillas or because you're Hispanics and you miss your tortillas. And that doesn't mean that every Latin or every Hispanic likes to eat tortillas, just, important caveat there. But if you wanted to find tortillas, you would probably go to the Hispanic aisle, right? And that's where tortillas would be found. If you wanted burger bread, you would go to the burger aisle, right? Today, you walk into a supermarket, and where do you find tortillas? Bread aisles. How did tortillas make it from the Hispanic aisle, that Hispanic corner, into the bread aisle? How did they become part of bread? Well, that's because as a culture, we've begun to influence how people consume, how people entertain. We were talking about your quinceañera, right?
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about your quinceañera?
And I knew you were going to ask that question. So what she's teasing me about is I have two 15-year-old daughters at home who are twins. So if you're under the impression we run the house, you know that's not true, right? So we have twin daughters who are up at Ursuline Academy, great girls, very different, and they come home. We moved, by the way, just a little background, we moved to Texas 2 years ago, so we've been here 2 years. They come home, and they're getting ready to turn 15, and said, "Dad, what have you planned for our quinceañera?" And I said, "You're Scotch-Irish Presbyterian. We don't have quinceañera." He said, "Well, everybody else at the school is having it at Ursuline, and it's a lot of fun, and they've already been to several of them." They never would have asked that question when I was growing up, no matter where they lived. And so this really has made a cultural change in a lot of different ways, in a fun way, and I think also in a way that also provides a lot of different opportunities for all of us to understand how the marketplace has changed. And whether or not that's higher education, whether or not that's telecommunications, whether or not that's the bread aisle, that's the future. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how you all see the opportunities changing for you all because of what's happening inside of this marketplace.
So going back to that, we're changing the way, as a Hispanic community, we're changing the way that consumers behave. We're not just now that corner aisle, we're talking about, not just the tortilla, not just the quinceañera, we're talking about education. Me and my family, we came to the U.S. only 8 years ago. I'm from Mexico, for those of you who can't figure out what the accent looks like. So we came here to the United States, and I was terrified about my kids going into school and not being able to have Spanish at school, which I had the opportunity to give them that education in Mexico. So we came here, and we were probably blessed because we actually were able to identify a school district where you actually have bilingual education. So our kids are actually going through education. They're going through elementary and through middle school and high school in a school district where we actually have bilingual education. Education where there's a bicultural focus, where there's a bilingual education, where my kids are able to continue speaking Spanish at home without me being afraid that we're losing our own heritage. And so when we think about those consumers, my kids and your nephews and the people that we were talking about, those 11-year-olds that were up there in the stats today in the morning, those are going to be our consumers. So if as a company we are unable to shift, we are unable to market, we are unable to understand that we might need a little bit more socializing, that we probably live on WhatsApp and we don't live on SMS, or that we need to speak sometimes Spanish and sometimes English, and sometimes we have to swap it around. And that we consume football, and we also consume football, right? So we need to understand that as a consumer demographic changes, as we continue to become that consumer potential, as a company, we need to change the way that we market. We need to change the way that we sell. We need to change the way that we speak to you. Because otherwise, we won't be able to continue to be the company that we are. We just got, a couple of months ago, actually it's almost a year ago, we acquired Warner Media, right? Today, this company is a very important part of our company, right? If we stay to one single part of the content and we just pretend that our consumers are just going to watch Game of Thrones, we're probably not going to make it in the next couple of years. We need to diversify. We need to bring Latin American content. We need to bring Portuguese content. We need to understand that there's a different consumer behavior. But that takes intentional approach. Mm-hmm. And to your question, we need to be able to recognize that that's our new reality. We are the new American reality. And that's what it means.
Yeah. I think we're also, that's a great point. We're also dealing with some challenges in our business as well. We'll call it a business. Higher education is a business. It's extremely competitive and getting more so. The demographics in the country are changing. As I said in my remarks earlier this morning, SMU and Cox are really making an effort to make those connections, particularly with the Latino community, but to increase diversity all across the board in a wide variety of different ways. Again, from veterans to first generation people who have come to the U.S. or to coming to university. But we also have to be thinking about how that resonates abroad, and particularly in Latin America. And we are dealing with our own challenges relative to the perspective of Latin Americans for coming to the United States, right? You probably talked about that a little bit today. And we have gone down to Mexico City, and we've gone to Monterrey, and I've made my own trip down to Buenos Aires, and the perspective has changed, and not for the better. And one of the things that we have to fight, and one of the communications that we always have to be sending is, it's wonderful to come to the United States and study. It's wonderful to come to the United States and work, to bring your families, to be a part of what we have here. Because right now the rhetoric is not helping us. And some of the things that are going on here are things that are really kind of driving folks to look at other opportunities. More and more Latin American kids, for example, are choosing universities in Europe and in the UK and Australia, not the US, and in Canada, where it's very cold, and we try to make that point as strong as we can. But we have a lot of work to do on our side as well to make sure that we're sending that message out. And also working with our corporate partners, and our partners, let me say this about corporate partners like AT&T, these are not transactional relationships, these are strategic relationships. As AT&T thinks about how their talent acquisition models have changed, they want to work with schools who understand these challenges that Deborah is talking about. We want to make sure that they get the message that we do understand it. But we also need those partners in places like Mexico City and places like Bogota and Buenos Aires and Santiago, talking to the kids down there, hey, take a look at SMU, take a look at the University of Texas, take a look at Tulane, take a look at some of these places that are excellent and want you there and can help bring you there. Never mind what's coming out, the rhetoric that's coming out of, say, the nation's capital or what's happening on the airwaves. Go look at it, go check it out, go talk to the dean, go talk to their corporate partners. We need to get that message out more, and we're working on it constantly, and that's how our market is changing too. It's not just what's going on in the bread aisle, right? It's the soft side of talent and bringing talent to places at work, or educating that talent in the United States and sending those folks home to really help build those economies as well.
So Dean, would you say that being Latino today is a competitive advantage?
You know, I would, and part of the reason for that, there's a number of different reasons for that. And I tell this story, Anna's heard the story 1,000 times, as have some of my colleagues in the room. I was told by a consumer packaged good company one time that the university where I was working was going to become a second-tier provider of talent because we didn't have enough diversity in our graduating classes for our BBAs and MBAs, because by 2025, 60% of the marketplace was going to be African American or Latino, and their workforce needed to represent that. You need to have a much more diversified perspective in the way that you're recruiting those students, and we heard that loud and clear. So yes, in a lot of ways it is, but also because of the softer understanding of what's happening in these growing marketplaces. Again, whether it's telecommunications, whether it's the financial market, whether it's wealth management, it doesn't matter. It's definitely an advantage. And again, how do we take advantage of being in that position, and how do we train the future leadership inside of organizations is a real question.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit, and finally, about the importance of inclusion and how inclusion plays a big part of this. It's a nuanced topic, and John said something I think that really resonated with me in his remarks. It's about working together. It's not about being in different tribal areas or different camps. It's how we work together as a society, as a corporation, as a system of higher education. So tell us a little bit about your all's perspective towards inclusion and how you're taking that in the next 5 or 10 years.
So in terms of inclusion, I would start with diversity. So first, it's the part of the diversity, right? And then inclusion is, to Cindy's point earlier today, it's being able to be asked for the dance, right? So you can be there, you can sit at the table, but if there is no action, if there's no voice, if there is no influence, the representation is not going to be there. You can make sure that, as a corporate organization, corporate Fortune 500 companies are actually not just thinking about the numbers. You're not just thinking about bringing, and that's why we focus so much on talking about, it's not about the Latino leaders. This is not a numbers game. This is really about understanding that it takes more than just one to actually make a change. It is more about bringing the people that will be able to bring that awareness. I was just talking about their tortilla. Did you know that Argentinians do not consume tortillas? Did you know that Colombians do not like tortillas? That they don't like chile? So
you say that with such surprise.
yeah. Not everybody eats with chile in Latin America, right? Not everybody eats with tortilla. But it takes all of us to actually sit down and really feel confident that as a society, as an inclusive society, we're taking everybody's points into consideration. It's not just about the Latinos. Latinos are not the only population that's growing today. We have Asians growing. And by the way, Asians are not just Asians. You have the Indians, you have the Japanese, you have the Chinese. They have the same diversity that we have. But if we are not making sure that we are bringing those differences, those cultural elements to the table, we will be unable to, what Claudia was pointing out before, this unity. Making sure that we become aware is important. The tortilla did not make it to the bread aisle because everybody used it to make tacos. It was used in many different ways, shapes, and forms, to the point that today we have places like Central Market maybe doing these exotic tortillas for wraps. They were not intended for wraps, but that's okay. And the same goes for our entertainment. The same thing goes for our education. Going back to that, it's making sure that we are interpreting, that we are bringing the awareness, but it takes everybody at the table to speak up. It doesn't just mean that you have somebody that's going to be there and sit down and do the hard work. I told you before, what got us here will not get us there. And that's important to understand. We need to make a shift in the formula. That's why we're here today. Making sure that the formula is shifted, making sure that we understand that we can't continue to just, put our heads down and work really hard because that's the way that we will go up. That doesn't happen. It happens because we become aware. It happens because we have a conversation. And it happens because our kids that are coming after us are pride. There's pride around our heritage. But they're able to do that multicultural marriages and multicultural homes as well, so that they can continue to carry our generations to come moving forward.
Right.
So it's more about the awareness, more about the education, more about investing and really understanding that we need to make some very concerted efforts around the inclusion part of it.
No question. And I think the ability to compete, putting on the practical side, the corporations, the companies, the communities, and the universities who understand that are going to be the ones that rise to the top. And the only thing I would add to that, when you talk about inclusion, it's also from the standpoint of your partners. I think that the only way that we're going to be able to move correctly in the next 5 or 10 years in the direction we need to go is to understand the partnership between high schools and universities, universities and companies, companies and their communities, and how it all fits together, and the idea of inclusion having to work in a very vertical way that way for it to work and for our communities and the society we live in, whether it's Texas or whether or not it's Massachusetts or whether or not it's Buenos Aires. That's what's going to make the difference, is that inclusion and inclusion of thought. Well, thank you so much for this wonderful time. We've had a lot. I could sit up here and talk about quinceañera all day.